All right, let's move on to our next speaker, and that's Benjamin Law, and he'll talk about astrophotography in the city. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. And first of all, really thank RASC for inviting me to speak tonight about my biggest interest, which is astrophotography. Um, I consider myself as amateur astrophotographer. That means I'm not doing this for for a living. I'm just doing this for interest. And in the last presentation, I've seen a lot of useful information that anyone can actually try to do some shots. Now, so my topic tonight is about astrophotography in the city. Personally, I live north of Markham, but not really in Markham, in a town called Stouffville. But because of a lot of people migrate to Markham and maybe Stouffville, the sky is actually very, very, very bright, and there's been lots of light pollution there. So a lot of people ask me, like, how did you take these photos, kind of like in the city sky? And this is why I wanted to share with all of you some of the ideas that how to take photos in the city. In order to connect to my journey in astrophotography, I think we need to go back to a little bit to my background. Um, I've been intrigued by a few very interesting celestial events when I was in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, as you probably know, it is a big metropolitan city with back in that time, it has like 6.5 million people in a very small place. So the sky is actually literally lit up all day long. So in the early 80s, there were a few interesting celestial events that I actually missed personally as a kid. I remember there was a solar eclipse. There was a planetary alignment. I just saw it from the news. And of course, many of you could probably remember Halley Comet. It was a big thing in the 80s, but I personally, I missed it. But I was intrigued so much by all these interesting events that happen in the sky, and I developed my hobby in astronomy. So this is the first telescope my dad got me in the early 80s. It is a Tasco Burt Jones Newtonian. It is a toy quality level, entrance level telescope. And you may think, wow, well, what is this scope going to give you? The first target I saw from this 3-inch telescope was actually Saturn. I still remember vividly how that felt when you look at Saturn's ring through the telescope, like in front of your eyes. It was a very, very, very good like feeling, and I'm surprised like how much I can at least I can see the ring through a very, very small scope. And um, in the early 90s, I still have a lot of interest in astronomy, and I actually spent about 9 months' time making my own telescope. And this is a 4.5-inch reflector telescope, and it's actually coming from two pieces of round glasses, and you grind it with a special way. And after many, many weeks, about 9 months, I spent maybe a couple of hours every week. About 9 months' time, I brought it to a factory to coat a layer of aluminum for me. And here we go. That was the first telescope and first and only telescope that I ever made. And my parents supported me in this hobby initially, probably because they saw this. I don't know if you have seen this meme on social media, but yeah, this hobby sometimes it is relatively pricey, But I think in terms of optical instruments, if you keep it well, it lasts forever. So telescopes like very old telescope, if you keep it well, you can actually pass it from generations to generations, or even you can sell it for with a very good price. So the depreciation rate for a good telescope is actually not that much. So in 1992, when my parents and I arrived Canada, we saw, wow, such a beautiful sky, right? And so my dad got me the Super Polaris Celestron Super Polaris C8 telescope. That was my first official like observational telescope, and I was so happy, and I kept it for many 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 years, and I think I sold it like a few years ago, and my interest in astronomy grew and grew, but not really get into astrophotography until my twin boys turned 5 and until my daughter turned 7. Think about when you have 3 kids running around in your house, and you probably want to find ways to get away from the house. And I think doing astrophotography is my getaway, like at least just in the backyard. I didn't go anywhere far. So I started with a DSLR, just a digital camera with a tripod. And then I started connecting my DSLR to my Super Polaris C8. And so that was my starting journey of astrophotography. Um, just like any astrophotographer, you probably know that, well, it was a very difficult process. And at the beginning, I really had no clue. This is the kind of like the first, well, not imaginary. I actually set it up and I took a photo, and don't do this. This is totally wrong. You can see that, this guide scope is not really guiding, and it is too far away from the scope. The center of mass here is too high. You have to put multiple weights here. And this mount is not supposed to hold up this much weight for astrophotography. So that this is just a wrong example. Learning curve in astrophotography is really, really steep. I think a lot of people would be agree that it is a very steep learning curve. Anything can go wrong, from a piece of cable, from the software you're using, from guiding, focusing, polar alignment, exposure. Sometimes I identify the wrong target for the whole night because they're so dim. Dills, bugs, anything you can imagine, especially this. When the cloud is basically following your target. That is very, very frustrating, and it happen all the time. When you look at the forecast, it's like perfectly clear for the whole night, and all of a sudden the cloud just following your target, and you just have to give up. There are lots of moments like this. So that's why the learning curve is very steep. You have to deal with frustrations all the time. Some of the photos in my early stages I want to share with you. This is Andromeda M31, and this one is the Whirlpool Galaxy M51. Um, you know what? I was pretty happy at the beginning of my astrophotography stage. Those are like golden memories because every astrophotographer will have to go through this stage. Maybe you and I at different stage. Some of you may be so much more advanced than I do, and some of you may be at the beginning stage, but we're all at a different stage. We just need to keep working on it. This is Bode's Galaxy, and this one on the right, I believe, is a pinwheel M101. I have a better version for the pinwheel in a moment to share with you. And after many trials, I found some turning points in this hobby. Few turning points I want to mention. First of all, I read a lot of articles online. I speak to a lot of people online, um, because this hobby, honestly, is very lonely. Like none of my friends in my social group doing the same thing, and I only know people online, like the cyber friends. They're doing that. So you have to speak to people online, and I realized that, hey, maybe I can modify my DSLR because a traditional what we call the stock camera, there is a filter that can actually block out a lot of very useful information from stars and nebula. And when they block that, especially the hydrogen alpha spectrum, um, the effectiveness of your photo would be much lower. Even though, yes, if you don't modify your camera, you can still take some photos of nebula with a lot and long integration time. But if there's a way to do that, and it is free, because that is just my DSLR sitting around, and I don't think I'm going to use it for any daytime photography because I have my phone. My phone camera can actually do a lot better uh, daytime photography. So I decided, hey, let's modify it. So how do I do that? YouTube is a good friend. There are many tutorials on YouTube that can you just follow this step by step. The YouTube video that I followed is using exactly the same model of camera that I'm using, the Canon T5i. So I just follow that step by step, screw by screw. I think I spent maybe 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, and I took out the filter and put it back. And that was good because after that, many of the nebula photos with nebula is just so much more vivid. Another turning point I want to mention is that I realized the mount is so important in astrophotography. Um, Many of people started this hobby. They try to go for like high-end scope or big telescope, but I think in my experience, the quality of the mount is the most important thing because when your stars can be tracked and guided nicely through a higher quality mount, that means the mount should be able to handle a more payload. That means that how much weight you can put on right here in your telescope, the position for the telescope. And if you have a higher payload, that means you have a more stable um, system. The more stable it is, the better the picture you will get. Sometimes the mount is more flimsy. It is a problem, even though you have a very high quality telescope. Another turning point is that after playing with the DSLR for a few years, I thought, okay, well, it seems like I'm reaching a plateau in the quality of the picture I'm producing. So I decided to save up, right? You have to save up money for this hobby, and to get a, color one-shot camera. People call this OSC. In short, it is a one-shot color camera. It is a dedicated astro camera. This one is a cooling camera as well. As you probably know, everything that uses electronics or electricity will produce electrical noises. And just like our CCD camera, the CCD camera uses electronics and there will be electrical noises. And the warmer the temperature, the higher, the more electrical noises are being produced. That's why for astro camera, for deep sky photography, you want to cool down your camera to maybe sub-zero temperature to try to minimize the amount of noise. Think about it, the less noise you have in your background, the better quality image you will get. And then a few years later, I move on to a mono camera with filters. That would be another step of upgrade. There are frustration moments in my astrophotography journey. First of all, not enough sleep. I'm sure if you do astrophotography, you totally understand. Like lacking of sleep is painful, but when you do this for hobby, when you just do this for your fun and for your hobby, it works. And sometimes you expect to get something like that, and you realize your subs means your photographs are really bad, and you waste the whole night time, you waste your sleeping time. But also, as I mentioned, it is a very lonely hobby, right? Yeah, your parents may think this is what you're doing, your friends may be thinking this is what you're doing, and um, your friend, your most common people think astrophotographer are doing something like really cool, but actually it is a very lonely hobby. You take all the subs and then you sit in front of a computer for hours and hours, and sometimes you just dump the whole data. It's not useful. You have to try again. So yeah, and there are moments that I wanted to give up. There are so many consecutive months that I didn't want to image at all. And I almost, I'm glad that I did not do that. I almost sell off all my gears. I was saying like, forget it. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. But I did not give up, and and then I realized that hey, this is the key of the hobby. You can't just give up, and if you want to do well, you can just improve on it. And and I found a lot of peers that can help me uh, support each other. This is so important. You want to do this yourself, as I said, this is a lonely hobby. Not even my wife understands what I'm talking about when I share with her about exposures, about guiding, about camera I'm thinking to get, or about all these technical terminologies. She'll just like, mm-hmm, uh-huh, and no one knows what you're talking about. So it is a lonely hobby, but thanks internet, we can find a lot of support from different social media groups, and we learn from each other a lot. And I'm always inspired by many astrophotographers out there. And we exchange ideas and we share struggles. So another important turning point, in my opinion, is you have to have a change in your mindset towards this hobby. First, it is just a hobby. Sometimes when you put so much time on it, you think that this is your whole life. It is your your entire personality. No, it is just a hobby. You can do well on it, you may not do well on it at that moment, but you can just believe the fact that you can always improve over time, own pace. At your own pace is very important, right? We all have different financial situations. We all have different needs from our family, personally, from my work. And you can only do what you can do when you have time and only with what you have. Of course, if you are able to save up a little bit more money to upgrade your gears, by all means, go for it. But we have to do this at our own pace. There's no competition in astrophotography, really. You compete to yourself because this is just a hobby that you always compare to yourself. And I live in a light polluted city, as I mentioned. So this is Orion. I'm not sure if you can see Orion beside the tree in my backyard. This is like south facing tree. So I couldn't see anything in the southern direction from my backyard. Anyway, south to my direction is metropolitan Toronto. There's nothing you can see in the sky from Toronto sky. But this Orion, it is so dim. Um, Light pollution is really, really bad. But there are solutions to fight light pollution. So maybe you can try shorter subs, means shorter exposure. Maybe you can take photos later in the night. Okay, take advantage of the astronomical twilight, and practice processing skills is also important. As long as you don't give up, just keep processing, processing. I found that processing is like painting. It's an art. You have to keep practice on it, and then you will find out how to make not so good picture into better pictures. And or if you want, you can just focus on planetary imaging. Some of my friends live in downtown Toronto. Even narrow band imaging, yeah, you can do that in the city, but they just focus on planetary imaging. Okay, you can try using light pollution filters, depends on how bad the light pollution is. um, Light pollution filters do not work with led light, unfortunately. So if your if the street light is the white led light, uh, doesn't help much. It may help a little bit, but don't expect the light pollution filters can help you screen out LED light. And narrow band imaging will be another option. Okay, that means you use special filters to just screen out the hydrogen alpha and oxygen three spectrum to compose photos. And I will show you some of my sample photos in a moment. So scopes that I currently have, I have a used refractor, I have a used edge 8-inch Casclane. I have a used Lin 60 double stack solar scopes. These are all used scope. I found that the price tag for the new scope is actually not quite affordable to me. Um, and This scope is an 8-inch Newtonian on the left. I got it for new because it was just like $700, and it was new. And this my latest addition to my family is a 14-inch sync scan Dobsonian. It is a big telescope. It is so heavy. It's like 180 pounds in total. I can just leave it in my backyard. But it was on sale. It was a big sale, and probably because it is in low demand. Like no one wants to get such a scope that heavy. And what about the mount? I have a tracker. I have a Celestron AVX. I have the Celestron CGM EX mount. So my a lot of questions came to my attention is, do you really need high-end gears for astrophotography? Um, Yes and no. But if you want to start astrophotography, definitely you do not need high-end gears. This photo at the back, in the background, is the planetary alignment just happened this year. You see from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Mercury right here, okay, and the moon. So Mercury actually is there. This is my second attempt for this planetary alignment. The second time I finally caught Mercury actually in the frame. The first time there were some clouds there. I wasn't able to do it. So I tried like a few weeks later. And so this is just DSLR and a 10 millimeter lens and a tripod. No tracking, no whatsoever. And I use Photoshop to stitch two panels together because the 10 millimeter lens is not really wide enough to cover all the planets. So high-end gears, yes, nice to have, but it's not important. It is not the most important part. So my interest in astrophotography, I have landscape, deep sky, planetary, solar, and I started ISS photography this year. It was very, very interesting. So this is my Horsehead Nebula I wanted to show you here. So 2017, it was like that. I think I have not modified my camera. This is unmodified camera. And then in 2018, I kind of modified the camera and you can see the difference. And then 2019, 20, and 2 years later, this is my latest Horsehead Nebula. I'm happy with this result, but I can keep adding data to it to make it better and better. This is my the longest project I have to date. I think I spent about 40 plus hours in total in exposure for the squid and flying bat nebula. This part of the squid is so dim. It took so much time, even with a mono camera, with oxygen filter. It took me so long because I was doing this right from my backyard. I did not go to any dark sky. I just did it from my backyard. So it is um, just in a light polluted area. And this is the Elephant Trunk Nebula. Okay. Um, Again, it is from my bottle 7 or 8 backyard from Southern Ontario. This is narrowband imaging. And here is a pinwheel. I like this one. This is I spent a lot of time like integrating data and polishing the processing and try to make the rims of the galaxy appealing without overblowing the core, with also with details. And also I have the nebulosity, the hydrogen alpha data added to it. This one is just from a tripod and DSLR. I think I did it last February at the David Dunn Observatory. It was cold. It was like -15 at around 11 o'clock. So I think I brought a battery pack, and the battery just get frozen. And I think I only have 2.5 hours of star trails over here. So, but it was clear night, so I am happy. I actually printed out on a canvas. Now it is sitting in my living room. Um, this is another my favorite moment. Is on the 2019 eclipse. I was like keep hitting the shutter by hand manually, one by one. So I was taking picture like once every seconds, every few seconds, and I found that one of the steps there's a bright spot right here. So I think I was one of the few people who discovered this bright spot on the subs, and few hours later, the news, and few days later, the news were talking about lots of people actually captured the same thing. During the lunar eclipse, there was a meteorite impact on the lunar surface. So, and I compare my subs. At this time, I didn't see the bright spot. Here, I saw the bright spot, and here, the bright spot is gone. So I actually captured that as well. It was just lucky. Uh, Saturn. So this is my Saturn picture, my latest Saturn picture. You can see the progress, 2016, and then yeah, now it's better. So I mean, you know, with time, many of you can actually improve in astrophotography. You just need patiently practice on it. Mars, it is from the last opposition last year, actually 2 years ago. I got some good details because the sky was pretty clear. And Jupiter, my latest Jupiter, I'm pretty happy about it. But I will try again in the opposition this year in the September 26th. So it is much higher up in the sky. I hope I can have a better seeing condition and get a better capture, ideally with the great red spot in it. Solar imaging is also very important and interesting to me. So the solar scope, I just put a planetary camera on it, and with practice, you can actually create something like this. Okay, here's an animation with the solar flares coming up from it. Um, ISS. So for those who haven't seen ISS, uh, here's a real time motion. You can see how fast that is actually moving across the sky. So the bright spot in the middle, you see, is rising up, rising up, rising up. Um, it is how fast it's actually moving. So I have to manually adjust my Thomsonian telescope, try to focus it using my finder scope, and to put ISS in the middle of the frame. It is challenging. It is challenging. But with the help of software, whenever you see ISS in the somewhere in the frame, there are softwares. Let's say PIPP is a software. It can help you to center your targets in the frame and put them together, and then you can do some amazing processing. So here is my ISS I try in May 11 this year. So I mostly spent 2 months trying that this year. So from the first trial and my latest one in July 15, I can see a lot more detail. I can even see the SpaceX capsule right there. And so it is cool. It is cool to do something like this in your backyard from the city. Um, Comet, just want to share this one here. Is the famous Comet Neowise 2 years ago during pandemic, and I went out with my two sons. They were like 7 years old, 8 years old back in that time. It was phenomenal. You saw the comets like hang up in the sky by naked eyes, and of course, photography can actually reveal a lot more details of the comets, like the one on the right that I captured. But just visually, it was exciting. 2017, me and my wife flew down to Kansas City. We planned to look at the solar eclipse, but Kansas City was cloudy, rainy, so I had to hit the road at 4 o'clock in the morning, drive to Jefferson City. Same in Missouri, but it was a long drive. So this is what I got. You see the shadow is moving from the right to the left, and when the shadow exits, right? So now the shadow is uh, covering the moon, and then the shadow is moving away from it. So it was once in a lifetime experience. So I really encourage anyone interested in astronomy, don't give up that chance on April 8th, 2024. It will be a big thing because the totality pathway is so close to us. You can just drive to Buffalo or Niagara Falls to have about 3 minutes of totality, and it's amazing. Hopefully, the weather cooperates. If you really want to make sure that you have a good chance to see it, then you may have to go somewhere in the middle of the state. It will be the weather forecast will be much more promising. So here's a solar eclipse picture, and yeah, this is another solar eclipse we watched last year in June 10th, 2021. We went down to Woodbine Beach. I think we woke up at like 4 o'clock. My whole family went down to Woodbine Beach by by 5:30, I believe, by 5 o'clock, and then we waited and waited, and the moon covered the sun, and it rises up. It was so beautiful. It was so amazing. It was so crowded. There were so many people there. Everybody's trying to look at the rise of the solar eclipse. And this year, I have the privilege joining the Starfest for the first time. And this one is not from the Starfest. This is from the Dark Sky Preserve near Kingston, the landlocked and Eddington dark sky for the Milky Way. And here are some of the photos I have from my uh, Starfest journey this year. And it was great. It was so much fun. There's so many people with all sorts of telescopes. You speak to people, you exchange ideas with people, you just learn a lot from each other. And this is another photo I got from my Starfest this time, and this one too. This is just a very faint nebula, and that I wanted to take advantage at the dark sky during the Starfest. I want to spend maybe just a few more minutes. I know I already spent about 30 minutes here. I want to spend maybe just a few more minutes talk about my community connections. Uh, Actually, my academic background is astrophysics from University of Toronto, and I actually did my thesis inside this observatory um, before, but um, it was the time before um, U of T sold out the DDO, the observatory. So it was in the late 70s. So those are all the telescopes in the DDO observatories. So those are in the administration buildings. That's the main scope. And because of my astrophysics background, I actually teach physics in high school. So I always want to connect my students with space and astronomy because it is my interest. So you can see my decoration in my classroom. I have a Star War showcasing all my astro photos, and here as well. I update my photos from time to time. I bring them to field trips, and I bought my solar telescope, and hopefully, they can see the sun, for real on the picture on the right. Yeah, it is my passion sharing astronomy and physics with my students. And sometimes I inspire some of my students to be future astrophotographers. And these are some of the photos taken by my high school students. I'm so glad that they actually brave enough to give it a try and and uh, send me back some of the photos they have got on their own. So it's a very rewarding journey sharing that with public, with my students especially. And I have two social medias that I always link with my um, students, and when I do public outreach, City Astro Photography Canada is my Instagram, and also Benjamin Astro Photography Hub is another social media that I have on Facebook. And again, I'm not expert in this, but I think I've gone through a lot of necessarily struggles and steps that a typical astrophotographers will go through. So if you're interested in this hobby, feel free to add me on the social media. We can learn from each other for sure, and by learning from each other, I'm sure we can all improve in this amazing hobby. And that's all I prepared for tonight. Thank you so much. Is there any question uh, from the audience?
Benjamin, thank you very much for your presentation. Fabulous images of the deep sky, great images, fabulous images of a planetary, and that ISS image was absolutely amazing. I hadn't
Thank
seen
you.
something like that before. Well done.
Thank you.
And of course, you spoke many words of wisdom during your presentation about astrophotography as a hobby. So well done. Emma, do we have any questions for Benjamin?
Yes. All right. First question comes in from Ennio Chalucci. How did you stay motivated in the early days?
In the early days,
Mhm.
uh, I think one of the motivations is that, when you achieve one goal, let's say when you got some photos, um, I know maybe your friends don't know how it's done, and but when you share that with your friends, when you share it with your family, that could be a motivation that, hey, maybe I can do something better next time. Especially at the beginning of the stage, it is so hard. But also, in terms of fighting for tiredness, uh, I don't know. I still work on the next day, but sometimes, when you love something that what you're doing, you just need to sacrifice. That's
That's a
my.
great answer. Thank you. This next question comes in from ZapFan. Did you take the IR filter out of your camera?
My DSLR, or yeah. So for my
Yeah.
DSLR, I took out the IR UV filter. So that way, the hydrogen alpha spectrum, which is around 658 nanometer wavelength, can pass through can reach the sensor. Of course, ideally, if you take out the entire filter, we call this the camera will be naked. Ideally, you probably need some IR filter to minimize some of the halo that glows in bright stars. But processing can take care of it. So yes, I took out the IR UV filter from my camera.
Cool. Thank you. From Eric Briggs says, Ben, congrats on your work that you displayed at the Starfest Imaging Contest. What was your favorite shot or animation from there?
My favorite shot is actually the solar eclipse one myself, because I think uh, first of all, it to me, like I was so stunned by the view when the moon and the sun rises from the horizon. Like not many people see sunrises anyway, but that was actually not a typical sunrise with the moon covering the sun. I think another layer is that I got my family with me, and I really hope that my kids can also develop interest maybe in science or astronomy in the future. But of course, it is their life; they will decide what they do. But I'll try to influence as much as possible. That's why I think that picture to me has a deeper meaning, because my family was with me, witnessed that special moments of the sunrise, and they still remember after 2 years when I spoke to them. Like, do you remember the sunrise 2 years ago? They all remember that. So that will be my favorite picture.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Ralph Chu says, great images.
Thank you.
And Yoshiluchi also wants to know, for the ISS image with the Dobsonian, did the software handle the telescope not rotating?
No. So for the Dobsonian, I have to unlock all. It is actually manual guiding. I did not lock any of the knob there. So I unscrew all the knobs, and so the Dobsonian is free to move by my hand. So I was manually guiding it. So again, I took many practice. Sometimes I practice using daytime. I saw an airplane. I try to follow the airplane using my Dobsonian. Of course, only when the airplane is not too close to the sun. Imagine the sunlight gets into a 14-inch Dobsonian and it gets into my eyes, and it will be horrible. So I follow airplanes for practice, but after maybe some practice, some of the tricks how to get a better chance to have your target inside the view, because the camera has a very small sensor, and also I have um, a 3 times Barlow with it. So a small sensor camera, 3 times Barlow. You can imagine the field of view is extremely small. So again, it's just practice, trying to make sure that the USS, when you track, it is still in the frame from time to time. And then, by luck, if the atmosphere is good, then you could get some good photos.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all our questions for tonight.
Okay, great.
Thanks again, Benjamin.